Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our accessory dwelling unit panel. This is our second panel that we've had that the Community Housing Forum has put on. My name is Paige Hartzell, and I am part of the Community Housing Forum. And we are really grateful to have our panelists with us this evening. I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panelists, and then I will pass it over to Linda Ramsdell of Headwaters Community Trust to speak for a couple of minutes about that. This evening we have Wendy Moran, Director of Home Ownership Programs with Rural Edge. We also have 3 ADU builders on our panel. We have Bill Slocum from Albany, who's a homeowner and a VHIP grant recipient who built a detached unit. We have Joe Oliver from Danville, a homeowner and a VHIP grant recipient who built an attached ADU. And Joe is on the Town Water and Septic Committee also for Danville. Not a committee.
I have Town Water and Septic on the system.
On the system, yeah. Thank you. We also have Beth Meacham from Greensboro, who's a homeowner who built an ADU with no grant funds for intergenerational occupancy and possible future caretaking commitments. We have Patrick Larson, a geologist and owner of Larson Applied Earth Science, LLC, specializing in wastewater and water supply design and permitting. And we're grateful to have Patrick here for a second time to share his expertise on those issues. And at the end, we'll have a question and answer with an opportunity for you to ask your questions. And now I'll pass it over to Linda to speak about Headwaters Community Trust.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Paige, for moderating tonight, and thank you all for coming. I'm Linda Ramsdell. I'm the president of Headwaters Community Trust, and I'm going to say a few words about that and then invite you to become members of the trust, which you can find out more about at the end of the meeting. Headwaters Community Trust is a newly formed community land trust serving Albany, Craftsbury, Glover, Greensboro, and adjoining towns. Headwaters' mission is, and it's on the membership form, this is what you would be signing up for. Headwaters' mission is to provide affordable homeownership opportunities and preserve the quality and affordability of the homes for future residents of our communities, and to promote community economic vitality through the development of decent, affordable housing, economic opportunities, and land for projects and activities that improve the quality of life. A community land trust is a tool for community-led development on community-owned land. A community land trust acquires land and holds it in perpetual trust for homes, commercial, and agricultural uses, and other functions that provide community benefit. Headwaters is focused on creating homeownership opportunities, and homes on Headwaters land will be permanently affordable for low and middle income residents. You can read more on our website, which is headwatersnek.org, and you can sign up there for our eventual newsletter. We don't have it quite yet, but we'll have one. So tonight, we invite you to become inaugural members. Headwaters is a member-led organization, and members will shape the work going forward. As we move from organizing to operating, there will be opportunities for members to get involved at a variety of levels, from joining a working group to attending the annual meeting. The first annual meeting will be in the fall, and at that time, the members will elect a board and conduct other business. We enthusiastically invite you to become a member to support the primary charitable purposes of Headwaters as stated above and on the membership form. Members of our initial board are here tonight. Maybe if you can raise your hands, people who are here. We have membership forms. Ultimately, they'll be available on our website, and we'd be happy to answer any questions after the presentation tonight. Thanks for your support, and stay tuned, and go to it, panel.
All right, thank you, Linda. So we already have our marching orders to sign up for the Headwaters Community Trust. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wendy Moran, Director of Homeownership Program at Rural Edge, for her presentation.
Okay. I'm just going to come down low enough to see the slides. Okay, so again, I am the director actually of homeownership at Rural Edge. Our program, what I oversee is partly the VHIP grant program, but also we have programs for home repair for income eligible homeowners. So that might be of interest to you outside of this meeting. We also do homebuyer education and financial counseling for members of the community. This is a major program that we administer in the Northeast Kingdom. Vermont Housing Improvement Program has sort of been in place for a number of years now, but each year they've sort of tweaked it a little bit. And this 2.0 version came out shortly after our last visit here when we talked about the 1.0 version. So I'm going to go through how it works for ADUs and a couple of other options, and then we can talk about any questions you might have. So VHIP originally was using some state funds, ARPA funds, and the governor in Vermont for VHIP 2.0 decided to put it into the budget, and that is when this VHIP 2.0 kind of came into existence, and it added some flexibility to the program. So if you can just go ahead and press that again. Okay, so there's a few different options for VHIP grant usage. You can do a unit rehabilitation, and that would be for an existing unit that needs to be fixed up to be able to be in use again. Next one, what we're here tonight to discuss, the ADU program. The next one, so new construction, and this is one that I wanted to bring to the table tonight because some of you maybe have land and you didn't know that it doesn't have to be an ADU. It could be used for just a completely new build on a piece of land within the program. So separate from an ADU, you can use it for new construction. And then the last one is for tenant-occupied units that have some code compliance issues. Okay, next slide. Go ahead and, okay, so there's different levels of grant funding available through this program. $30,000 per unit if you are just rehabilitating a unit that's existing that's 0 to 2 bedrooms. And then $50,000 per unit if it's an ADU, a 3-bedroom or more for a rehab, or a new unit. So for an example for a new unit, let's say you own a home that is quite large and you think you could downsize into part of the home. If you take your 1-unit home and create an additional unit within the structure, now we have a new unit. So it can be considered an ADU or it can be considered a new unit, either way, but you can get $50,000 for that. And then another thing that it can be used for is buildings that have sort of a structural element that affects all units in the building. So maybe you have a 2-family home, 1 unit needs some renovation, but it's only a 1-bedroom, which qualifies for $30,000. But maybe the building also needs a roof, and that affects all the units in the building. So instead of the 30, we could bump you up to the 50, and that extra money could go towards the roof. Okay, next. And again, new unit creation, which I talked about. Accessory dwelling units also get $50,000. And then coming soon, they are going to be offering an additional $20,000 per unit to create ADA compliant units as a way to, serve our folks that are needing some wheelchair accessibility or anything like that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so one of the things about the program is that you have to agree to match the grant that you receive with 20% of your own funds. That can be through a loan, it can be through your own bank account, however you want to do it, but 20%. So if I give you a $50,000 grant, you then need to put how much in of your own money? $10,000, 20%, exactly. So before we can issue any of the funds to you, you have to expend that first $10,000, provide receipts to us, and then we will give you the first draw, so to speak. Okay, another rule of the program is that you either need to sign a rental covenant, and it's either one of two things. If you do a 5-year grant, that means that for the period of 5 years, you agree to renting at HUD's fair market rent, and you agree to work with coordinated entry to find tenants who are coming from homelessness, okay? The other option that VHIP 2.0 has now put into the game is a 10-year forgivable loan. The 10-year forgivable loan takes out the coordinated entry piece and requires that you rent at HUD's fair market rent for a period of 10 years. And let's see, you also agree that you will complete the project within 18 months of signing your grant agreement. We have now added a short online and interactive fair housing training that is required before we can give you the grant funds. And we also ask that you accept a credit score of 500 or above. A lot of the folks in the Northeast Kingdom and around Vermont that have trouble getting housing, it's because they have a terrible credit score. And so you're agreeing to not hold that against them. Basically, if they have a score of 500 or above, then you won't use their credit score as a reason to not accept them as a tenant. And then we've already talked about that. Oh, charge no more than 1 month's rent for deposit. Okay, we talked about renting at HUD's fair market rent for the area and working with coordinated entry. That's if you're doing the grant version. And then you can switch to the next slide. And then this is the new 10-year forgivable loan. So it works just like a grant. Every year for 10 years, we're forgiving a portion of your loan. You're not paying anything on the loan. There's no interest on the loan. It's just a way to encumber the property so that you will be following the guidelines of the program for that period of 10 years. You keep it for 10 years, you do all the stuff the program asks you to do, and then it's just forgiven and you don't have to pay it back. Now let's just say for 1 second, I'll come back to that slide in a second. Let's just say 5 years down the road, you've signed up for this 10-year, but 5 years down the road, for whatever reason, you decide you need to sell the property. Only 5 of the 10 years will have been forgiven. So if we give you $50,000, you have only gotten $25,000 forgiven. You will have to repay the other $25,000. Okay. I know maybe Bill's going to talk about this, but we have the disbursement schedule. I just like to remind folks that it is a reimbursement program. And so you do have to have some funds to roll through in order to make the project work. You can't just depend on the grant because we're going to expect to see receipts and we're going to reimburse you as we go. So once you've given us receipts for that first 20% match, we're going to then release 35% of the funds. That's giving you some money to work with, but then we're not going to give you any more funds until you're at the halfway point. And that means financially and sort of project-wise. So we're going to send an inspector out. He's going to say, yeah, they're about halfway done, and they can show me that they've spent about half of the money. So we're good to disperse 25% more. And this is where it gets a little bit long. Between the halfway point and the final point, you get no funds. So you have to have some money to work. And this is an area that we are like constantly tweaking with the state in terms of, can we make this work? Because a lot of builders, a lot of landlords run into, they don't have quite enough money to get to that final. So sometimes we will do an exception and sort of do a partial final if we can say that they're, you know, halfway to the final point from the midpoint, we can give them some money. So we're a little bit flexible there. We want the projects to finish. We're not going to be total sticklers about it. And then we also hold back 15% until you're leased up. We have to make sure that the tenant, that you've signed a lease with a tenant at the fair market rent. And then once you have supplied us with that lease, we will give you the remaining funds. Okay, choosing tenants. So you do have the right to select your own tenants. We do encourage you to do your own due diligence. Just because you receive a referral from coordinated entry doesn't mean you have to accept that particular referral. You have to still protect yourself and your home. And so, you know, I would say you would still want to do reference checks and things like that. And you would still want to make sure that that you feel they would be a good tenant. You got to adhere to the fair market or fair housing policies and guidelines. Yep, you're going to meet the program requirements for 5 to 10 years, depending on which you select. And is that the last? We already talked about that. Yep, okay. Great. We don't need to go over that slide. You can move on. That's pretty much it, yeah. So that's what I have in terms of how the program works. And I'm going to pass it to Jo to share her experience.
Hi, I'm Jo Oliver. I live in Danville, and I'll try not to run on too long. But 4 years ago, I bought I was really lucky. I was able to buy a house during COVID, and it's a big old farmhouse built in 1845, 5 bedrooms. So what does single person need with 5-bedroom house on 20 acres of land? Well, I was wondering that too. But the original goal was to share it with other people. I ended up initially renting out some rooms, working with Home Share Vermont, which were very helpful. I recommend them for background checks and help with the process. They are acting in different areas of the state, so it just depends on whether the town you're in works with them. And then I found out about the program through Rural Edge and the grant program, the VHIP program, which I was really excited about. I realized that I didn't just want to, you know, turn the washroom, for example, into a kitchen by putting a microwave in it and then renting out the upstairs bedroom. I really wanted something more than that. Not just to create more housing, but also because my larger vision for the land was to have, I have this land that needs to be farmed, I need to find farmers. So I started advertising the house on Vermont Land Link, which matches up landowners and farmers. And at the same time, I started doing getting involved in the VHIP program, was able to get the grant, searched around for a builder to do it for me. And so last spring, I was able to, or probably a year before that, it took like ranging in a year for me to find a contractor because I don't have the skills to build it myself. So my daughter drew up a design for a 2-bedroom, 2-floor ADU, which is the back third of the house. And the house is kind of a long rectangle, and it's sort of been added onto and changed by different people who've had the house over the last, 100 years. And the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of smooth out some of the exterior design, so that to add a couple of covered porches, which would then match the wraparound porch that is on the main part of the house. So anyway, I got a local builder to come in starting last. When did he start? He started in May, I think, and he worked through the summer. So by November, the whole back of the house was now back third of the house was now a separate unit. So 2 bedrooms upstairs, a bathroom, and then downstairs a kitchen, open kitchen dining room plan. And I had found people who were interested in it through Vermont Land Link. And that turned out to be Charlene and Brett Parker and their 2 daughters who moved up here from Virginia. They came up and visited, we got along. Charlene had a dream of wanting to be a farmer on a small scale, and we clicked right away, and she's here tonight. She'll probably, if anyone has any questions about her plans or her experience moving up here and moving into an ADU, she's gonna be able to share some of her experience with you all. And so they moved in November, and so far it's been great. Working with Rural Edge has been wonderful. It was a very smooth process. I did run into that experience of running out of money suddenly. That was a little alarming because the bills kept coming, you know. But that passed, and I'm really happy with the work that was done. It is important to, if you are hiring someone, of course, you want to be really clear on the design and the plans, and have a good relationship with your builder, right? And the contractor, who is then, you know, keeping everything else coordinated. We are looking forward to the spring. So that's kind of my story. Thank you.
Bill, and speak about your place in Albany.
Hi, good evening. Bill Slocum, and I have been a builder since in the 70s, so I've been doing it for a while. And I found out about VHIP. I had looked into it early, but the only program that was available was the $35,000, and that didn't really fit what I wanted. So once I learned about the $50,000, I called up Wendy, came over, and they explained it to me, and I went through the process. It was very straightforward and pretty easy. And I had some plans, and so we started from actually I'd already started my house, but that was fine with them. So I was well into the house, but then we got started from there, and it's been really good working with them, and Victoria, who's been my contact,
Right.
has been easy. We've had because of my background, that's where the draw came through. I was used to having a contract and having whoever my clients were pay X amount at certain points, and that big jump at the end is a lot, and we've been talking about that a little bit. But anyway, so actually this is the second or third one that I've built of these separate rental units, but ADUs are a better way to put it. And I find that between 500 and 600 square feet works real well. It's easy enough. Again, I do a lot of my own work, so I get a lot of sweat equity into it, so that saves me a lot of money. So I can't really talk about square foot prices, what it cost me or what it didn't. But I find that works real well, and that's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and then a combination kitchen and great room. And split it in, minimal number of walls inside. And then the one thing I also would strongly suggest, is putting a bud room and a mechanical room right adjoined to it, at maybe another 100 square feet, somewhere around in there, enough to do that. The other thing that I've been done for a while now and continue to, and I'm real big on, is building what they call a pretty good house. And pretty good house is a house that is very tight, well insulated, and simple, straightforward, and not super, I built some really super tight, very high-end efficiency homes, and realized that maybe that wasn't the best way to do it, so especially with these smaller ones. So I've switched over to doing pretty good, which are very tight. I use triple glazed windows throughout, and you can buy them. They don't have to be super expensive. Coltec, who is up in Canada, as I've been buying windows from them. They have very affordable triple glazed windows. That may change with the tariffs coming in, but they have been very affordable. So I'm not sure what will happen with that, especially if you stay with the very plain window. Don't get a lot of color put in it or wood grain or any other kind of stuff. You stay with the straight ones, triple glazed, and not a tilt turn. You can just use the regular crank type window. They're very affordable. And with that, you have a very tight package. And what I do is build with 2x6s, 2 foot on center, all the way through, and then either use foam or dense packed cellulose inside. And the outside has an insulation barrier, zip-bar it's called, and put that on the outside, and that stops any thermal shorts or breaks all the way through. So the whole package goes together pretty quickly, and then you can take it from there as far as siding. And I think that building, not trying to just build a shack or a simple house, is really kind of a waste. This is going to be your house too at some stage of the game. You're going to own it. It's going to be something that's going to be there for a long time, so it's worth putting the effort into building an efficient house that will last and use very little upkeep, take very little upkeep, and it just continues to be just a wonderful house that you can continue to rent. And actually, I've got mine already rented, or if she hasn't signed the lease. But it's a person here in Craftsbury who's in a bad living situation and who is just anxious. She's ready to move in tomorrow. I saw her yesterday, and but anyway, she knows when it is. I'm trying to finish by late April and have that ready to move in. And so far, it's been really a very good program, easy to go through, and very good. But I would stress, in 500 to 600, you can put a very comfortable unit in it. And I also build all electric, so I'm not adding wood or any of that. I've been through wood, and wood's very nice, but it's a lot of extra, work, and you have a stove, and with a renter, I don't really want a renter lighting fires in there. I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't. So I try to make it easy. So I just, with the tight house and the way that I build them, doesn't take. I heat mine, it stays at 70 all the time. It's just straight 70 with one 6-foot baseboard heater, and that's it. I just leave it, don't touch it, and it stays right there. Some days, because I have a southwestern exposure, it gets quite a bit warmer, but I never open the windows because it's going to get cooler. So even though we've had a really cold winter, it's 70 in there. It's t-shirt. So anyway, I'm sure I went over, didn't I?
No, that's perfect. Okay, Beth.
I'm Beth Meacham. I live in Greensboro. My story is more philosophical than anything else. Growing up, my best friend came from a Greek family, and there were 3 generations living under one roof. I thought that was cat's me out. And I had another friend who had grandparents living at one end of the house, and I thought that was pretty cool. That impression on me has lasted my entire life. And as I've gotten older and looking at being able to downsize, live more simply, I decided that it would be valuable to be living under the roof with one of my children and not having deep pockets to handle the medical care that comes along with getting older. There's a certain amount of security tied into that. And I was looking at my children's both of my children's futures, in that we live in a tough economy, tough times, jobs are not always plentiful, and things change suddenly. And I wanted my kids to know that they had a safe roof over their heads. We bought a house 13 years ago. It's a Yankee barn home. And the design of that home permitted us, the original design accommodated building a wing. And we took that to heart. When we moved into the home, we were zoned for 4 bedrooms. We had 4 bedrooms. We eliminated a bedroom because we wanted to be able to use the space differently, which made adding an addition onto our home, which we refer to as the outlaw wing, not the in-law wing. We were able to essentially add a bedroom back onto the home. We were able to, because of how the home had been built and the fact that we had a patio that was built on a pad, we were able to take advantage of that pad and not dig a foundation. We were able to tap into the existing septic. We were able to tap into the existing water. A lot of that saved a substantial amount of money. We had been living in a 700 square foot cottage as part of our downsizing exercise in Massachusetts, and we hit the market right. We walked away with enough money in our pocket to build the addition without having to look at grants or loans. There's flexibility in that someday we won't be around, but my daughter and her husband will be. They won't necessarily need a big house. And they have the ability to easily move into the wing that we're in and rent the main house, which also gives them the security of income down the road. And so all of these things kind of were important in our thinking. And that's pretty much my story.
Thank you very much, Beth. I'm sure there will be lots of questions for all 3 of you a little bit later, but right now I'll pass it over to Patrick.
Is this working? Yep. Okay, so my name is Patrick Larson. I'm a septic designer, and I'm here to talk about wastewater and water supply permitting. And as I said last time, the feel-good portion of this program is over. So basically, if you're building an ADU, or any other building for that matter, there's a number of different triggers in the state's wastewater rules that trigger the requirement of getting a wastewater permit. Those include, and these all apply to ADUs, if you're adding a bedroom to an existing house, if you're building a new separate dwelling, or if you're adding new water or sewer lines. All those things are going to trigger needing a wastewater permit, and I'll talk about some of the implications of needing a permit in a second here. One thing I wanted to talk about was just a little primer on what, as a septic designer, the information that we use to design a septic system. Typically the main thing that we're interested in is the number of bedrooms, but what we derive from that is what's called the design flow. The design flow of a project is basically the theoretical water use, and that's directly related to the number of bedrooms, but it's a little bit easier to use design flow because not all bedrooms are created equal in terms of how much water use is allocated to each bedroom. So, and this is all in the state rules. The state has come up with these numbers. So the state would tell you, if we're designing a septic system, we're going to assume that for each person in a house, it's 70 gallons per day that we have to accommodate for. They also assume that for the first 3 bedrooms of a house, it's going to be double occupancy. So there's going to be 2 people. We need to design a septic system for, if it's a 3-bedroom home, at least 6 people. So that's 420 gallons per day. After that, so for every bedroom after the 3rd bedroom, they assume single occupancy, so it's 70 gallons per day. So, and why that is important, you'll see in a second. Let's see. So the 2 most common scenarios for these ADU projects are, the first one is if you're increasing the design flow. That can include building a separate dwelling with no change to the existing dwelling, or you can add bedrooms to an existing dwelling. Both those things would increase the design flow. And again, I'll talk about the implications of that in a second. The second thing is you can do it where there is no increase in design flow, which it sounds like what Beth did, where basically you're swapping bedrooms. So you have an ADU project with, say, 1 bedroom, and you take a bedroom out of the existing house. Now, that only works if it's a 3-bedroom home. Remember, if it's a 4-bedroom home, what's that 4-bedroom design flow? That's 70, right? Your 1-bedroom ADU is 140 gallons per day, so that still results in a net increase in design flow, which creates more, more permitting conditions, basically. So the only way that works is if it's a 3-bedroom home, you can do a 1-for-1 swap, or if you have 5 bedrooms, and then you have to get rid of 2 of those bedrooms to get your 1-bedroom ADU.
Is that for attached ADU? Sorry to interrupt.
Either way.
Either way.
Yep. And that would be even if it's not an ADU, like if you're just adding a bedroom to a house, that's still an increase in design flow. It still triggers everything. So the first scenario, if you're increasing the design flow, this is the expensive option. The ADU is going to require a fully compliant wastewater and water supply, which basically means you're going to need a new leach field, potentially a new water supply, although you can theoretically tie in with an existing water supply, but that water supply also has to be fully compliant. So a lot of these older grandfathered systems, the setbacks may not be met between the well and the existing leach field, in which case you would not be able to tie into that well. There's also yield requirements. If you're sharing a well, you have to get at least 5 gallons per minute per residence that it's hooked up to. So if you don't have the yield, that can be overcome because you can design a storage system to make up for that lack of yield, but again, it's more money. The other hoop you have to jump through is you need a fully compliant replacement leach field identified for the existing home. That one does not need to be built, but you still have to do all the soil testing. You have to show it on a plan, send it to the state for review, along with the design for the leach field for the ADU. The other thing you can do is you can build a single leach field for a shared leach field for both dwellings, and this is what Bill did. That may be a good option. In Bill's case, he was basically starting with a piece of raw land, and we were able to think about it ahead of time. He wasn't working with an old existing home and then a new ADU. So everything was really well thought out, I thought, on your project, Bill. If you have an existing home, this option might make sense if it's a really old house. You have a leach field that's maybe getting close to failure. Maybe it's more than 40 years old, something like that. Maybe it's time to upgrade that. It might make sense to combine those two dwellings with one shared leach field. So that's also an option, but that all has to be fully compliant. If you do that, then that would eliminate the requirement for finding a replacement area, another replacement area for the existing home, obviously. All right, so if you're going the route Beth went with no increase in design flow, so the bedroom swap, you can tie the ADU into the leach field for the existing house. That leach field does not need to be compliant. It would still require a wastewater permit. We still have to show how those, a new septic tank, the sewer line running from the ADU, how that water's getting from the ADU to that existing leach field. That all still has to be done. But it's a lot lower in construction costs. The water supply, you can tie into that as well. That doesn't necessarily, I believe, need to be compliant with regard to setbacks, but it does need to be compliant with regard to yield, so you need to still get 10 gallons per minute. And then you still have to meet water quality requirements, which every new well does now anyway, so that's not such a big deal. So, the takeaway message here is if you're thinking about doing this, early on in the process, you're going to want to consult with a Vermont licensed septic designer to come and do a site visit, have a look at your lot, and make a determination about whether what it is you want to do is feasible. There's a real good chance. These conditions are not easy to meet, especially if you're on a small village lot, for example. If you're on town water and sewer, that helps immensely. All the setbacks disappear. Your water's treated, everything. If you don't have that luxury, which most of us around here do not, there is water, like up on the Common and in Greensboro Village. That does help, but it's still, especially actually both in Greensboro Village and up on the Common, it's really hard. The soils are so bad, it's really hard to find a spot for a new leach field that's going to meet the setbacks that you need to property lines and foundations and other people's leach fields and water lines and all that stuff. So you'll want to consult with someone, have them come to your place and look and talk about your project just to see if it's even feasible. A lot of times it takes 5 minutes to figure out that it's not. And sometimes it obviously is feasible as well. So either way, that's a good place to start. I'm not here looking for work. There is a list of all the licensed designers in Vermont compiled under the DEC website. If you just do a Google search on that, it's got every single designer in the state of Vermont. It's got their contact information, and it's got where they work out of. You definitely want to find someone in the area. No one's going to come from Middlebury to look at your project. You can also call the state regional engineer. Our regional engineer, his name is Eric Duratsian. He covers Caledonia, Orleans, and Essex counties. He's responsive. He's good. He's solution oriented. So he's a very good resource. He's also the one that, if you do have a project, we go through the design and permitting stuff. He's the one who reviews it. He's the one who issues the permit. So it's also a good first phone call. And then the last thing, so I ran all this by the wastewater. Before I came here, I ran this by them. This is all state rules, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting anything. So I ran it by the engineers at the state, and they were pretty psyched about this event. But they also handed me this. It's a document that they're working on called Accessory Dwelling Unit Drinking Water and Wastewater System Fact Sheet. It's still in draft form, but they did indicate to me that this is going to be published very shortly. What that means, I don't know, maybe a month. But it's got a lot of good information, and if anyone wants to look at this, they can. I'm going to take it home with me, though. It's still draft form. But it's got, examples of ADUs. Do you need a wastewater permit? Can I use a composting toilet? Just a lot of stuff like that. So I think that's all I've got.
Thank you, Patrick. Yep. So now we can open the floor up for questions. And if you want to pose your question, and I'll repeat it.
I'm just wondering about property size. Like, we've been told, you have to have 2 acres to have an additional ADU. Is that true, or are there laws or rules around that?
So are there laws or rules about the property size for an ADU. Does anybody want to take that?
So that's going to be a town. You're going to want to look at the town zoning rules. If you live in Craftsbury, there's no zoning, so you can pretty much do what you want. If you live in Greensboro, there are rules about.
Newport Center.
I don't know. On that. I'm assuming they have zoning, but I don't know. So you'll want to go to your town zoning administrator and ask them about it. Wastewater, water supply, they don't care.
Oh, okay.
And
But-
the VHIP program also does not care. So you just have to follow the rules of your town.
Yeah, and we're just a little farm.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes.
For Patrick, if you have a septic system that's on really good soils, it was a pretty simple design, could you add on to that septic system, or the leach field, expand that leach field?
So if
One
it's
versus building a separate one?
Yeah, so if it's a system that was engineered and permitted, so we have all the soils data, the state of Vermont said this is a good leach field, you can add on to that. Theoretically, I mean, assuming that that leach field isn't bumping up against setbacks in every direction.
Yeah, with all those.
But yeah, theoretically you could do that. If it's an old grandfathered leach field, there's no way.
Jenny?
Could each of you tell us what provisions you had to make for wastewater for the ADU?
Joe, you want to start?
Maybe start on this end, just 'cause.
Yep, sure.
I really didn't have to because we'd eliminated a bedroom and the addition was an open floor plan, so it really was not, that was one of the things that made it simple.
And I've always had septic designed for an extra bedroom. If it's going to be, when we started with Patrick, even though I only have one bedroom, I designed it for 3 bedrooms. It's just because I know how hard it is to go back. And it turns into, so he does that. And then, like I said, as he said, we had to put in another tank for the separate building, but it wasn't huge and it wasn't a huge expense. And first the big expense was right out front and then went from there, so.
And as Patrick noted, I'm on town water and sewer in Danville, and I went from a 5-bedroom house to two bedroom units. I did have to, even though all the plumbing was actually in the house, we updated it, but basically it didn't change. And of course, added some plumbing for the apartment that wasn't, or added on to the existing plumbing in what became the apartment. So what I do have to pay for is basically 2 units. I couldn't get away with arguing that, look, there used to be 5 bedrooms, now there's 4 bedrooms, so it shouldn't change. No, that didn't work. And Eric was very helpful in clarifying that I did not need an entirely new sewer connection. I'm forever grateful for him for straightening that out.
Thank you all.
I have a clarifying question for Patrick.
Sure.
So it really is what your septic is rated for then. Like we have a 4-bedroom rated septic. We only have 3 bedrooms in our house because we never did the 4th bedroom. So if we did something separate on our property, then say leach field likely could be used or some septics in there.
So I'm going to repeat the question for the recording. So the question is about like if you have a septic system that's graded for a certain number of bedrooms and you actually have less bedrooms but want to do an ADU or an addition, how would that work?
So do you have a permit for a 4-bedroom home? Or
Yes.
so it's an engineered
It
septic
was
system?
intended to be.
Okay. So if you've built a 3-bedroom home and you have a permit for a 4-bedroom home, was the leach field built for the 4-bedroom home?
Yes.
Okay, so basically you have 70 gallons to play with. And you can't do an ADU with 70 gallons. It's 1 bedroom is 140, and that's where this whole design flow thing kind of screws us up. Trying to think. There might be a way, if you do, so there's technology called pretreatment, where you actually treat your wastewater before you send it to the leach field. And the state allows us to double what's called the loading rate. So we can basically cut the footprint of the leach field in half. So there's a possibility if you wanted to build an ADU and then use a pre-treatment system before it goes to the leach field. And I'd have to check with Eric on that, but that sounds like that might be feasible. Those pre-treatment units are not cheap. They're $15,000. They clean the wastewater up to almost drinking water standards before it goes to the leach field. And they require annual service contracts, so that the vendor has to come and check it out every spring.
I have a question. So with the VHIP, can that money be used to solve these water issues?
It can be used for any part of the project
Okay.
that you want to use it for. One of the things I was going to mention, an ADU by definition is one unit attached to a home, and it's typically smaller than the home, like 1/3 of the size. And where Bill prepared a septic system or leach field for 3 bedrooms, he's created his own home, which is a 1-bedroom. He's created an ADU, which is a 1-bedroom. He cannot create another ADU, but what he could do is create another new unit. It's the same thing, I realize, but an ADU is only 1 plus your primary residence. So this is kind of a little bit of a loophole. That's why I wanted to bring up the fact that you can use VHIP funds for new units as well, new builds, because he technically could apply again and build another unit on his property, standalone unit, using that same septic system.
So the term is just different?
Technically, the term is just different, but by definition, an ADU is one extra.
It will only be 1 and that's all it can be.
Ever.
But then you can build a new unit.
You
That
could.
just happens to be 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Talk to the state, I don't make it up. Yes.
Gina?
My question is for Wendy and the source of the funding for VHIP. I imagine it's state and some federal pass-through. And if it's state, is the government budgeted for that this year? And at a level that's adequate? And 2, if it's federal, what's the agency and are those monies tracked?
So the question is about state and federal funding and where the money is coming from.
Really good question. So VHIP 1 was federally funded through ARPA funds. That money is completely expended at this point. The funds that we're working off of right now are state funds. I have very little left in that bucket for the funds that I received this year to administer. We are expecting, the governor is trying to put in more funding that is actually budgeted. So rather than like it's a line item that stays year after year, we do expect those funds to be much less than they've been in the past, but it would be state funded.
So it's in this year's budget?
They're,
This budget's out?
well, I haven't heard that it's complete.
Still proposed.
I feel like it's still proposed. I believe the proposal is $4 million for the state. That when you divide that between the 5 homeownership centers across the state, that's very little money per homeownership center, but there could be more. We just never know, right? I mean, we got it in 2 phases this past year. We may get some now and some waterfall funding in the end. It's just hard to know with this climate.
Mike?
I have 2 questions. I'll start with 1. I'm wondering, people that build ADUs, if the $50,000 to $70,000 was anywhere close to completing the project. And you guys seem like you have less cost than most of us because you had.
Yeah, No, it probably is not, but it's a good chunk, and it's certainly allowed me to finish the project. So I just used it as that. But no, and it's hard for me to say, like you said, yours was pretty expensive, but because I do so much of the work myself, I can't tell you what it actually costs. But, you know, a single unit like that, I understand what the state says, 1 bedroom, 1 bath house is what, $200,000 or something like that.
They're claiming that if the state were to build a new unit to the size that you're talking about, even, they're talking $400,000 to $500,000 per unit.
Yeah, so, but it's much less than that, so, I mean, it depends on how much of the work you can go do, so, and what you have and how much, what your site costs are gonna be and stuff like that, so, you'll just have to see, but it certainly helped, there was no question.
Will you share with them how you met your match?
Yeah, as far as what I did, I just ended up continuing along until I had $10,000.
Well, but you didn't, okay, so I wanted just to share with them that you can meet the match through sweat equity. So if you want to share how you did that.
And also I've used sweat equity all the way through. So for the first time ever, I've been able to pay myself.
Yeah, technically.
Yay.
Right. So we will allow you to use your sweat equity to reach your match. So what we will allow is if you are a licensed contractor of some sort, up to $50 an hour for the work that you're doing. If you're not, and you're just like me, just general old person, and you want to do the painting, and you want to install the flooring, and you want to do all that, you can, and you can charge or get credit for up to $35 an hour.
Yep.
So a lot of people do it that way. A lot of people don't have that $10,000 or that $6,000 to add to the project, but I will say that typically what we see is projects are much less expensive if they're in a structure that's already standing, right? I mean, he's building his from scratch, from the ground up. That's going to cost way more money than building inside a structure that's already there.
So if I'm building inside my house and building a small apartment, is that okay to rent it for a short-term rental, or, okay, because I thought I had read that somewhere.
So the question is about if somebody is building a unit within their home, can it be a short-term rental?
The program is only for leased up properties. We expect a year-long lease. And no, it's not at all for short-term rentals. The whole idea is to provide more affordable housing for residents. So, unfortunately, no.
So, what could it be for a family member?
So the only way it could be for a family member at this point is if you went the 10-year forgivable loan route. That doesn't require the coordinated entry piece, but the state has directed us to put the units that are for family members at the bottom of the list for grant funds. What they don't want, and I'll just explain, what they're not looking to do is take grant funds to create a beautiful new unit for their 18-year-old or college student person that's already living in the home, to create a new bedroom or a basement apartment or something like that for that person. So that's sort of the sway that they're trying to say, the heart of this program is to create more affordable housing, and if the person's already housed in your house, it's not really providing that.
So what about in Beth's case? For a project like that, would that be a qualifying project?
So again, we would have to look at it like it's for a family member. So if there's other projects that sort of are higher on the list, you know, it is a very competitive program now. Last year when we were here, it wasn't as competitive. I would say that the word is out about this program, and we get way more applications than we can fund at this point. So we are looking for quality of the, you know, quality of the application and that sort of thing.
Jenny?
A friend said she would like to add one to her house, and that her son's family live in the big house and her live in the accessory. Is that grant eligible?
So the question is about grant eligibility for someone who wanted to add a unit so that she could live in the unit and her son could live in the main part of the house.
We get that question a lot, and it seems like a really great idea, especially for multi-generational living. And unfortunately, no. The ADU has to be the rental, and it also has to be the smaller unit. So.
Question for Bill. As a builder, do you draw up your own plans, or do you have an architect draw them up, or you get them off the shelf?
I would always suggest, with these small ones, I have built enough, and I keep them real simple, so I draw my own plans, and I've seen enough plans where I can do that. But and it's like I said, they're very small. I use that. I know how big a bathroom needs to be in the bedroom and put it in there, and that's why I talked about that. But for anybody doing it who hasn't, I wouldn't just try to design it from scratch. I would either look on the internet, look around, see if you could find an example. There's a lot of cottages, types, things on there. Take a look, find one that you sort of like, and then find maybe a designer to customize that to your, because I wouldn't suggest building without plans or without a good plan. You know, it's a good plan, because then if you do hire somebody, they want to know what you're doing. The electrician should be able to lay it all out for you and tell you how much it's going to do. Code is code, and same as with the other things. That's the one thing that has to be. So they can lay that out, but they need a plan to do that. So I would definitely look for that.
Somebody over here?
I have another question about the funding. In my idea, in my head, in my house, the existing bathroom would go with the ADU. Is it possible to use funds from the grant to build a second bathroom that would stick, like that would be in my living space?
So is it possible to use the funds to add to the larger existing living space?
If a component of that is going to be moved to the ADU.
Okay, if a part of that is going to be moved to the ADU unit.
I'm going to say technically no. I guess like it depends. You basically are going to have the grant money to use. Very few times is the grant money plus your 20% going to equal the project. You're probably going to put a little bit more into it than that, or a lot more in some cases. Like, it just depends on the build, right? But no, they're not going to let you make an update to the other unit with the funds.
Does that include rewiring, splitting wiring into two units?
Does that include wiring and splitting wiring into the two units?
I guess I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think that if you submitted an invoice that you paid to have the wiring separated, that it would be okay. That's what I think, and I would be more than willing to get an actual answer for you on that.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could share the fair market rent that is currently.
Oh.
What is the fair market rent right now?
So
It depends, yeah.
it really depends on the number of bedrooms and also the type of heat and utilities that you have, believe it or not. If you're going to include them or you're not going to include them. I believe, and it also depends on the county, but I believe in this area, for a 1 bedroom, it's around $860. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, a little bit higher than that.
A little bit higher than
Yeah,
that?
Yeah, it's 9,
It's 9.
20 or something like that.
It went up in January, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it
So
did
it's
go up.
a little bit more, yeah.
So it's not little for, you know what I mean? Like, I think some of the units that are like 3 bedrooms are $1,300. I feel like even, you know, for a 1 bedroom, at those kind of rents, they call it fair market rent. I still think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of people to afford. A single person renting a 1 bedroom with 1 income.
And that's all based on HUD, isn't it?
That is,
Yeah, it's HUD.
HUD marks those for us, yes.
Yeah.
Can I also nobody's asked this question, but I did want to bring it up in this setting. When you add on to your home and you build an ADU or you build another unit, I really want you to think about the value implications that will also increase your taxes. Okay, because this is one thing that especially like single family homeowners that aren't in the business forget to remember, that you are adding value to your home and your town will reassess and your town will raise your taxes. So I want you to be prepared for that to happen if you choose to do the program, so you're not blindsided.
I would love to hear from our panelists about how that's impacted you, if you don't mind speaking about that.
Anyone?
Well, I haven't seen the new tax bill yet, so.
Right.
Yeah, but they're aware of
Bill's
it.
not quite done,
Yeah.
so his hasn't been reassessed. Has yours been?
It has not, and also because in my case I'm rehabbing an existing house, I also have, not credits, but I can also apply for, I've talked to my friend who's in taxes, but she's assured me that there is some money that I can get back from at least federal taxes, if not state taxes. So it kind of balances out, I think.
Great.
And I can answer the fair market rent on a 2-bedroom in Caledonia County for 2025, I believe is $1,060, including heat. Yeah.
And we were reassessed, and our taxes went up, but we're a family with multiple incomes, and it kind of balanced out.
Yes.
Do you have to be living in the primary home, or can you rent out both of the units?
Can you rent out both of the units, or do you have to be living in the main part of the house?
If you're building an ADU, by definition, you have to be living in the primary home. However, you are certainly more than welcome to apply as a rehab for one and a new build for the other. Okay? So you could do it. It's just a different way to apply. Yes?
What happens if you build the ADU while you're living there, and once it's built, you move out and come build? Does that change anything?
If you move out after you build, was that the question?
Yeah.
Tricky people. The state is the governing body that enforces the rental piece after we're done with the build, okay? So Rural Edge, any home ownership center that administers this grant and this forgivable loan is not going to be the governing body after it closes, okay? So I'm not going to be going around and looking to see if you're in compliance. I don't know what the state will do. So I guess I don't know how to answer that.
I guess they're more concerned about the controlled rents
Yeah,
on the ADU.
they're very more concerned about the controlled rents, I would say, is that is accurate.
I just wanted to say again that my housemate, my tenant, Charlene Parker, is here with us. If anyone has questions about her experience, I wanted to give her an opportunity to say a little about what it's like living in an ADU and moving up to Vermont from Virginia in November.
That would be great. We actually have time. Charlene, if you would like to come up and say a few words about your experience. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Charlene Parker. Hello. Whoever just said hello. So, yeah, a little bit about my experience. Joe shared a little bit. I don't even know where to start. So we have a little bit of a long story. My family is from Virginia. We experienced a slew of unfortunate events that kind of led to myself, my husband, our 2 dogs, living in a tent in my parents' backyard, while my children lived in the house with my parents. And we were very fortunate to be able to do that. But what you were saying really touched me, because that was our experience. My husband was a software developer, and I was a government employee in Virginia, and through sheer happenstance and things changing, our life situation changed, and it was no fault of our own, but it led us to this situation that we found ourselves in, and we just could no longer afford the house that we were living in. Our mortgage payment was too high, so we made a really tough decision to have to sell our house, instead of facing bankruptcy. So that led us to really looking at our lives and deciding what we needed to do and wanted to do with them. And through that, decided that we wanted to become part of the Vermont community. I had fallen in love with farming and volunteered on a farm down in Virginia. And through some research about where should we go that would support this farming dream that we have, it led me to Vermont. We were able to pay off a lot of debt and put ourselves in a better situation from selling our house. So we were looking at property to buy in Vermont. We looked for 6 months and came up against wetlands and permit issues and a lot of other issues that just prevented us from being able to secure property. And so we were kind of not really running out of time, but sort of running out of time. And we're on Vermont Land Link, connecting farmers to land and land to farmers. And kind of at perfect timing, we had another unfortunate event in my family that led us to no longer being able to stay with my parents. So we were now truly homeless. And within probably 2 weeks of that, I connected with Joe on Vermont Land Link, and we hit it off immediately. Her vision for her property aligned with my vision for the rest of my life. I was a beginning farmer looking for a farm, and she had a farm looking for a farmer. And so it was really kismet timing. And I'm just very thankful that Joe went the route that she did, and the apartment is affordable for us. We are still currently a 1-income household. I was lucky enough to obtain a state job, so I have a decent job. But even as someone mentioned, the rent, even at an affordable housing HUD rate, affordable is subjective, right? We at this point don't have much debt. We were very fortunate, as I said, to be able to pay off a lot of our debt in selling our house and put ourselves in a more financially stable situation. But even at the HUD affordable housing rate, it's still a very tight budget for us as a family of 4. And so affordability is very key in enabling us to be able to be where we are today. We would not have been able to move to the state, I don't think. We were looking. We did find a few apartments that had super long wait lists throughout the state, but they wouldn't have accepted our whole family. And by that I mean my 2 furry babies. We have 2 dogs, a husky and an American bulldog, and in both Virginia and Vermont, we were not able to find an apartment that would accept those dogs. There were breed restrictions and things. So that has been my experience. I may have been able to find a slightly more expensive apartment, but I would have had to give up my 2 dogs and would not have had beautiful land to farm on. And yeah, so very grateful for all of it. Are there any questions about that, my experience or being a tenant or finding a tenant? Sure.
What are you gonna be farming?
Vegetables primarily, diversified vegetable farm, peppers, a lot of hot peppers. It's what kind of started our whole journey, and it's what we're gonna continue on with. One of our big projects and main projects for this year is actually a community giving garden. The core vision of my farm, and a big part of Joe's as well, is turning the property into a community space. And as someone who has now faced food insecurity, and having to make those really hard decisions between fresh produce and packaged foods for my kids, I just really wanted to be able to give back to the community, and maybe prevent some other folks from having to make those hard decisions, since I have an off-farm job and a stable housing situation that I can afford with what I have. So that's the primary focus of this year as we kind of learn the growing situation in Vermont. We're gonna focus on the community giving garden and a little bit of market gardening, but lots of vegetables. Thank you. Glad to be here.
I had one more question, because everybody talks about this is the minimum rent. Does that mean that the rent goes directly to the state, and that's kind of how this?
No, the HUD, do you want to repeat?
So the question is about how the rent flows. Does it go to the state or does it go to the homeowner?
Yes.
The rent goes directly to the landlord.
Oh, okay.
It's just the maximum is set by HUD.
Oh, okay.
And I just want to stress that that's the maximum. You do not have to charge HUD's fair market
I
rent.
thought that was like the minimum.
No, that's the
No,
maximum. So my point is that, your market may not be able to support a rent that's HUD's fair market rent. It depends on your market, and just because you go through the program, that doesn't mean you have to charge that high. You can go lower. It's up to you.
Yes.
So hearing Joe and Bill, with the connection of your landlords, it sounds like you found them through Vermont Link and either a connection. Does that mean that you chose the 10-year rehab option, or are you doing a 5-year? I'm doing the 5-year. Okay, so the Vermont Vermont Land Link only exists as a way to connect it's a website that connects farmers and landowners. There's no other connection.
So the coordinated entry piece was met in some way.
Right.
And for Bill, you're doing the 10-year.
Yeah. That made more sense for me, and that was definitely the way I wanted to go. And like I said, I had no trouble finding a tenant, and she's real pleased, and rent's good, and so I'm happy, she's happy, worked out well.
I think the addition of the 10-year option for all units has been what has driven VHIP to become so popular. I would say 2/3 of our applicants are going the 10-year route. We don't dislike the 10-year route. It provides affordability for a longer period of time, right? Like 10 years instead of 5. And I think it's really good if you're going to do multiple units, especially to do a mix. I think that it's not always great to have multiple units all having to have coordinated entry referred tenants. I think it's better to have a mix. And I think there's a place for both, and we need more housing. So either way, the other thing that led us to recommending this 10-year forgivable loan is the tax implications on the 5-year grant. When we grant the funds, there's you're going to be dealing with $50,000, let's say, on your taxes in 1 year, right? If you do it through a 10-year forgivable loan, it's whatever's forgiven each year that you're dealing with on your taxes. So for a lot of people, that made the difference too in making it a better fit.
Because the grant shows up as income.
They both do. Yes?
Can you switch back between the 5 and the 10-year? Like say you find a great tenant through coordinated entry, and then they decide to leave after a year, and you decide to rent it not through the coordinated entry program.
So the question was, can you go back? Can you switch from like a 5-year to a 10-year, or vice versa?
You can switch.
So that brings us to 7:30, and I want to thank all of our panelists. And it's going to take us a little while to clean up, so I don't want to speak for them and whether or not they have to dash off. But maybe people can ask questions if they have questions while we're packing up.
And if you didn't get a packet from me, I do have more packets with information about the program. If you want them, come see me.
Great. So I just want to thank East Craftsbury Presbyterian Church and the Community Housing Forum for hosting us tonight. And the Community Housing Forum meets here in this location on the 4th Sunday of every month at 4 p.m. And we really welcome your voices and your input to the housing situation in the area. And thank you to Wendy, to Bill, to Joe, and to Beth, and to Liz behind me here for keeping time, and to Patrick. And thank you so much.